everybody, welcome to episode 65 of the Masterclass. I'm Cam, and the voice you're about to hear is Dave.
That's me.
Thought you were going to hang me to dry there.
Why?
I don't know. Just had that feeling.
I'm
But welcome. How are you, sir?
good. How are you?
I played a wicked game of kickball yesterday, and the old body's not as spry as it once was. My legs are sore.
That happens.
It's so sad. Gone are the days where I could eat and drink whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and have no repercussions.
Yeah.
But it was a fun game. We won 14-13. We went down 7-0 in the first inning.
Oh no.
Came back and scored like 10 runs. Then we're up 14-7 going. So we won like a 14-run run, which is a terrible phrase. Gave up 6 in the the top of the last inning to win by 1. It was very
A nail biter.
I also heavy air quotes here, slid head first into third base, more like attacked the ground ferociously. And luckily it was not caught on film because it felt really awkward, and I imagine it looked kind of like the monkey falling out of the tree. Have you ever seen that video? The monkey picks his butt and sniffs his finger and just falls out of the tree. That's how I felt I looked while I was trying to slide. And it hurt really bad. But I did it, you know. My wife was watching. I had to show off. Reminder of the stud she married. I don't know why I'm talking about this. We have much more important things to discuss. We have follow-up this week, Dave.
Oh, yeah.
It seems our self-pity has worked.
Yeah, he was very kind.
So our follow-up this week comes from longtime listener, longtime follow-upper, Jerome. He's back. He was like busy going to the Middle East and stuff. But he did listen to one of our episodes while he was over there. So we are now a multinational podcast.
That's pretty cool.
Thanks to our jet set style listeners.
Yes.
So he last time he wrote in, he talked about Peter Rollins, and he has given us a link to another podcast where Peter Rollins himself, I guess, explains more of where he comes from, and we'll have the link in the show notes if you're interested. I've yet to listen to it. It's on my to-do list for the coming week, so perhaps I will have some follow-up on this follow-up next episode. But appreciate Jerome sending us in a direction to gain some better understanding of this fella that Jerome likes. So we'll listen to that. We'll put a link in the show notes if you are interested as well. But his follow-up concerning Matthew 18-20, which is what we discussed the last episode, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. I didn't want to be wrong on my own show. That'd be embarrassing. He said, on the subject of binding and loosing, I also thought about Matthew chapter 16, verse 19, where Jesus says, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. We actually talked about the Matthew 16 verse while I was in Israel, because we went to Caesarea Philippi, which is where Jesus probably spoke those words to Peter and the other disciples. I've talked to people both on the more conservative / fundamentalist and on the liberal / progressive ends of the spectrum, and the consensus seems to be that Jesus is giving Peter and or the disciples the power to determine what is right and wrong, which is a fairly spectacular thing, I think. You can see this played out in Acts on the question of circumcision. I think this interpretation also fits for the Matthew 18 verse. Maybe this is what you guys were getting at, and it just didn't come through to me like that. Question mark. Would you disagree or agree with the what is right and what is wrong?
I think that is very much a part of what's going on here in this verse, and I guess the part that I would agree with is the that being a spectacular thing. I would agree with that. The fact that there's this sense of God trusting his followers to be able to discern some of those things. And again, I don't know that we articulated it so well, but yeah, the context has more to do with that sort of decision making. How is it that we address issues that maybe are not directly spoken of in Scripture, or that have a cultural context or something like that? And then how do we apply that to our lives here versus this? I don't want to completely go on this tangent, but it's really not about obtaining material things. It's not about getting what we want. It really is more about discernment and this ability to apply heavenly truths, God truth, which is truth, in our lives here on earth, even though we are fallible, sinful human beings. So yeah, and I agree. It's a spectacular thing. It's an incredible thing. So
Well, especially when you consider it says what you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, what you loose on earth will be so like the consequences of those decisions, whether they're right or wrong or good or bad, has major ripple effect.
Mhm.
And whether it's about what is good and bad, or what is true and false, or who is forgiven and who is not forgiven, like whatever um, dichotomy you want to use there, like the effects don't just end here. It's not what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas anymore,
Mhm.
right? It goes to eternity, and that's to both of your points of spectacular is like not only does he trust us, but he
yeah.
gives us an incredible responsibility to take that power seriously.
Mhm.
And I'm reminded of that super cliche phrase from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, Peter. And there's a lot of times I scratch my head. I'm like, really, God? Like, you not know how dumb people are? Do you know how dumb I am with
Yeah.
decisions that I make? But I think one of the things that my experience in the church and in Bible study and in school, one thing that I don't think I was ever aware of was the gravity of my decisions, because Jesus just forgives you.
Mm.
Grace covers everything, which, and I say that flippantly to make
Cheap
a
grace,
point.
yeah.
Like, my decisions still matter. My decisions still carry a serious weight to them, even though Jesus forgives my sins. It doesn't mean that I should continue to sin, even though I like to continue to sin,
Mhm.
right? And is it Romans where Paul says, if we're something about grace, should we continue to sin? No, by no means.
Yes, it is in Romans.
And I can't help but, from our discussion last week and from Jerome's follow up here, just get to that point of like, yeah, it's our decisions carry a large amount of weight and responsibility with them, and we have to start acting and living our lives that way. And that's really hard because I'm so focused on what's directly in front of me that I struggle to think how a split-second decision is going to affect eternity. And I wish, and this is going to sound like I'm making an excuse, and it's probably because I am making an excuse, but I'd wish that I had been taught that at an earlier age, or if I had been taught that at an earlier age, that I would have paid attention to it. Because I feel like I have to break decades-old habits of being like, well, sinned again. Good thing Jesus loves me.
Yes.
And that's, as I get a little bit older, as I am eagerly awaiting becoming a dad, like, you start to think about different things and how you want to raise your kid and what you want to teach them, and how you need to change so that you're not saying do as I say and not as I do, and all of that. And yeah, the power and the responsibility that my decisions have on my life and those around me is far greater than I would hope.
Mm.
I don't want that kind of responsibility.
And I don't want this to be a cop out, but I look at scripture, and it is full of people like us. I mean, God doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't hide it. He doesn't, all of his people made bad choices at some point or another. And maybe even argued with him about some of those bad choices. And it's so much about, I think what you're talking about, what we're talking about here, really comes back to that relationship. It's relational. It's not just a do as I say. It's more a give and take sort of thing, and that, along with many other things, is one of the attributes of God that's now easier for me to understand that I'm a parent, because I know there's certain things that I want to like tell my kids, and every now and then they'll have this really good point or argument or just um, asking for mercy, whatever it may be, where I kind of have to take a step back and go, okay, I'm going to bend the rules, or I'm going to do what they, I'm not going to be so hard nosed about this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to say, I hear what you're asking for. I hear what you're arguing. I hear what you're, you know, um, can't think of the word I'm looking for, but yeah. So being a dad definitely even impacts that on the flip side of you start going, okay, I get the whole God, the way he does things a little bit more. Not that I'm on par with him, but just being a parent opens your eyes to some of those things.
Yeah. In the next bit of follow up, he said, in regards to where 2 or 3 are gathered, which is the very end of the passage we covered last week, I think Jesus may be referring to the idea of God being embodied in love. This is to say that when multiple people are working together and earnestly seeking God's will in binding and loosing, God will be exemplified in the love and grace they show to one another, even through disagreements. Thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know that I have any right off the bat on that one.
Well, my initial response is that Jerome has a high opinion of people getting together and doing good things. When multiple people are working together and earnestly seeking God's will, and that, I sound like such a idiot, assuming that people can't do that, but it's just in my experience that where 2 or 3 are gathered, Jesus is present, has been abused, or in my mind at least misrepresented. I would hope that this is what it means. That when 2 or 3 people are gathered in his name doing his work, then yes, absolutely, I agree with this. I just think that it's one of the biblical passages that has been hijacked to use as a blanket statement for whatever people want, like 1 Corinthians 13 and the love thing, and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And there's a few passages that have been sort of hijacked and become bumper stickers and used out of context and everything. But I would hope that what Jerome is saying here is absolutely correct. That if 2 or 3 people, or 4 or 5, are gathered to work towards the purpose of showing God's love, that yes, that's exactly what he's talking about in this verse.
And I initially didn't have a whole lot of thoughts because, well, I don't need to go into that. I'll take it a step further. I can probably get behind this and agree with this, even to the point that a group of Christian community may come together and decide that God has shown them a certain thing to be right or good, and it's different than what another group has found to be right or good. And those two things on the surface may contradict each other. And ultimately, it comes down to that obedience of what God is calling us to. It's not so much the I'm being right for right's sake as it is we want to honor what it is he feels like he is showing us. And I guess an example would be, let's just take infant baptism. I do believe there may be a set of Christians, whatever denomination, wherever you're at, where you say infant baptism is important and we need to do it. And the reason that we do it is because we feel like this is what God wants us to do. And then you have another group of Christians that are on the exact opposite. We're not going to do it because we don't think it's right and it's not what God wants us to do. Both groups are being obedient to God, and both can be in the right. And part of this, I'm just going to come down to, there are many things throughout history that Christians have disagreed upon, and I think there are a lot of those things that, for that person, that group, in that moment, that is what they need to be obedient to. And just because somebody disagrees with them does not mean that they're not correct in their behavior. And I'm not exactly sure if that's what he's talking about, but I do believe that. So
one of the things that, and I am taking this point and going off on a strong tangent here. So, listener, you have been forewarned. Sorry, Dave, you're stuck here. One of the things that I have been thinking about very recently, and even more so, I was listening to a podcast on the way home today. It's the Nerdist podcast that Chris Hardwick hosts, and he does like The Talking Dead, and he's been an internet and TV guy for a long time, and he's super hardworking. Seems like a really nice guy. I listen to his podcast every once in a while, just based on who the guest is. But my boss Joel suggested this episode because he talks with a guy named Hakeem Al-Yushai. I butchered that last name. He's an astrophysicist and grew up in the exact opposite scenario you would expect an astrophysicist to grow up in. Moving every year. His dad was a weed dealer.
Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, grew up all over the South, wound up in rural Missouri. His middle school and high school got the worst grades in the state. But somehow they got computers, taught himself how to program, read the entire encyclopedia, world encyclopedia by the age of 10. Just a really go-getter type of guy. And so they start, so I respect him from that standpoint. Like, he literally has beaten the odds in every possible way to become a very intelligent, successful scientist. And so that story alone kind of grabbed my attention. And so he starts talking to Chris about the universe and planets and stars. And, you know, he's like, it almost, and I'm paraphrasing, but he speaks at a very popular level. Like, he's not trying to impress you with the way that he speaks. He's just a dude that happens to be an astrophysicist. And he's like, you know, everywhere you look, it's clear that the universe is creating light. Everything that it does is creating light. The way that, you know, hydrogen combination and some other nitrogen, I don't remember, but he's just rattling all these things off, and all the universe is doing is creating light. And then you get these planets like ours, where human life forms, and what do? We build skyscrapers and fill them with light. So even us, and you know, and he's like, the universe is trying to fill the darkness with light. And I was like, you know, for two dudes that aren't Christians,
yeah,
you are you're stumbling upon something very interesting here. And so I have been, and they got into the whole interplanetary species thing. Like, if we stay on Earth, we're doomed. It's just a matter of time before we go extinct or kill the planet. Because global warming is the thing, and so they start talking about the whole interplanetary thing. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't say anything about being interplanetary in the Bible. Then I'm like, well, wait, who cares? Like, right. It doesn't matter. And so I've been trying to, all of that to say, I have been trying to expand my horizons on what is possible, because nothing in my upbringing or in my biblical training suggests, well, if I die on Mars at the age of 95 of natural causes and Jesus comes back, am I going to miss out on the resurrection because I'm not on Earth? Well, I would like to think not. I would like to think that God created the universe, and no matter where I am in it, he's still in charge. And to me, that is just such a fundamental shift in the way that I think about what is possible, how God operates, how narrow of a focus we can have as Christians on not even what's right and wrong, but what's possible. And it's just messing with my head. I think in a very good way, but it's causing me to reconsider a lot of the preconceptions I have about a lot of stuff.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, that's been proven out through history. And I think we've talked about that of just, it was heresy to say that the earth revolved around the sun once upon a time. Flight was reserved for the angels. Man was not intended to fly. And it was a sin for us to even attempt to, try to fly. And so there's a lot of things like that it's not in the Bible. It's not there. Don't put it there. And I'm with you, and I just think that speaks to how infinite of our God is much bigger than we give him credit for. And yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of other thoughts on that, but I think we should probably get to our main topic, which is 14 whole verses.
Oh boy.
Might have to take a deep breath.
All right, so we're on to Matthew 18:21-35. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold, with his wife and children, and all that they had, and payment be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of the servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when the same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, Pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you pleaded with me. And should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you? And in his anger the master delivered him to the jailers, until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you, if you do not forgive your brother from your heart.
All right, so how often will my brother sin against me and I have to forgive him? Like, at what point can I just say, you know what, dude? You've used up all of my grace. I cannot give you any more. And he goes, as many as 7 times? Like, who's going to be dumb enough to sin against me 7 times? I can kind of see where he's coming from. Like, can we just call it like it is? This person's never going to change. And Jesus says, I don't say 7, I say 77 times. Like, take the amount of grace you think is due a person and just exponentially increase it. And I don't think he literally means 77 times so that on time 78 I can just drop you like a bad habit and move on with my life. I think his point here is, again, take your expectations and just increase them incredibly. Your forgiveness is not tied to a recurrence of sin. Your forgiveness stands on its own.
Mm-hmm.
It is a self sustaining thing. It is there, regardless of whether this person has sinned against you once or repetitively. And that, of course, is illustrated for us greatly by God in Scripture. I don't think he's keeping a tally count. I think, you know how tiring it would be for him if he had to do that? Just never ending. Like, I don't even think he can write a computer program that would keep up with how many times people sin against him.
Yes. Well, and I think too, there's, boy, it's just funny how much stuff is in my brain that I believe that I really probably couldn't defend. But you know, at some point in my Christian life, my Christian walk, I heard somebody say that the Jewish law said you're required to forgive somebody 3 times. No, I don't know if that's true or not.
No, but what a terrible law.
Well, I know.
Like, because you know the person's only forgiving you because they legally have to. They don't
3
really
times.
mean it. It's like when you tell your 4-year-old to say they're sorry to their brother.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Like, you know they don't mean it.
Yeah,
But-
and then the whole so Peter's like, okay, I'm gonna double it and then add 1 kind of thing. So 7 times, is that what I'm supposed to do? And
That's an important number in the Bible, right?
yes. And so yeah, I'm with you. I do think the whole and this I feel more strongly in terms of what I've learned is that the whole 77 or 70 times 7 is kind of the idea of it's more than you can ever count. It's more than you can ever truly.
It's definitely more than the fingers and toes I have.
Yeah. You don't reach this and be like, okay, I don't have to forgive you anymore.
Yeah, and I think in theory, like I was just ready to blow by this and get onto the parable. I think in theory this is really easy to be like, oh yeah, sure, just forgive people. But like put yourself in a situation where, no joke, this person's on like major sin against you like 50. I don't know how I would handle that. Like I think at that point I'd like file for a restraining order or something. Like if there's a person in my life that is continually sinning against me, and we talked about this in previous episodes where I'm like, sinning against me is not just pissing me off or not just making me upset or not, like breaking my iPad. Like that's all just, like living together or just doing life together. That's fine. But like sinning against me, in my estimation, and I may be wrong in this definition, but I kind of lean towards like if you sin against me, like it is a personal, deep issue that requires reconciliation and requires trust to be rebuilt. And so I wouldn't let anyone get near 7 times that sort of impact in my life. We're like, see you later, pal. Take a long walk off a short cliff. Like,
yeah. And I mentioned 3 before, but as I'm sitting here thinking about it, if I was in a friendship, relationship, acquaintance, I knew somebody and had reason to interact with them, and 3 different times I caught them in a significant lie, I'd probably be like, we're done. I have no room for you in my life. I have no need for you in my life. If you find it necessary to lie to me, we're done. And the world would tell you, bravo, way to go, good job. You should cut those people out of your life. You shouldn't deal with that sort of poison. But yet, that's not what Jesus tells us.
Yeah, that's makes me feel really good about myself, Dave.
Yeah.
The most non-uplifting Bible podcast there is. Sorry. So yeah, that's going to be fun to think about. All right. Verse 23 and on. The parable of the really, really jerky guy. Seriously, he gets, owed him 10,000 talents. And talent was, a denarius was 1 day's wages, or was that a talent?
No, no, no. The denarius is 1 day's wage.
Okay.
So like a denarius is the equivalent
Of
of
a day's wage.
Yep.
Right. So 10,000 talents is far more than one
I like
denarius.
researched this a little bit, and it's basically the equivalent of 55 million denarius. So 55 million daily wages.
I'd say that's significantly more. That's
Yeah,
like, how can you owe someone that?
Yeah, the 10,000 talent is just like an astronomical number. And that's the thing, is you would never reach that point. You shouldn't be able to reach that point.
Well, considering that the currency was time based, but
Mm-hmm.
or time valued, he must have made some really bad investments. Gambling problem, maybe. Anyways, so this dude was in the hole like just crazy amounts, and the person that was owed the money
A king.
gave some grace and says in 27, out of pity for him, the master of the servant released him and forgave him the debt. So not only did he forgive him the debt, he did not wind up selling the slave and wife
And children.
and children to somebody else to try and recoup the value. So he has in one fell swoop potentially saved this family from a cruel master and pulled them out of this seemingly infinite debt. And this guy's first response was to chase down someone who owed him 1%, if my quick math skills are correct, of what he had owed this guy.
Yeah.
Which...
It's still a sizable amount. It's still,
Right, but when you consider what he owed...
4 months work.
It's 1% of what he was in debt of.
Yeah.
He could go get this money from this guy, knock him up real... That's not the word I wanted to use. Beat him up real good. Oh, man. And he would still owe 99 times, or 99% more.
Mm-hmm.
100%, 100 times that amount of money. And to me, this is like a like 10,000 foot view of how fickle we are.
Right.
We can be blessed and receive forgiveness that we can't even place a value on. And the next second, we are just spewing absolute venom because someone stole our parking spot at Target, whose bathrooms we will not use.
Yeah.
But we'll still shop there.
Yes. Well, and I'm certainly guilty. I'm certainly guilty of this because...
Oh, me too.
I guess just for me, though, in particular, like if I think about day in, day out, what I do in terms of conversations that I have with people, particularly with my good friends, particularly with the people that I trust, I'm so quickly to point out other people's sins and why they're unworthy. And yeah, I'm really good at this. I'm embarrassed to say. So quick to do it. Quick to do it.
So what is it about us as humans, do you think, that causes this sort of behavior? And this sort of behavior does not require this extreme of a situation.
No.
This sort of behavior happens in far more regular occurrences than this sort of situation. What is it about us, do you think, that encourages that sort of behavior? Because I don't know anybody $55 million.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I still receive forgiveness and still treat other people like crap sometimes.
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is I think we do have that debt because we have the debt to God. And I think that's what's right. That's what's represented here is this.
Oh, yeah. But I was We're gonna get to the spiritual part later, Dave. No, I mean, I'm trying to put myself in this guy's shoes. Like, I have never, outside of God,
Right.
owed anybody
Your house,
anything.
Your house is
my
probably-
house is my biggest debt, and
the reality is
that bothers me.
right. But even in that, there's still this concrete. There's a physical thing that can.
Yeah, and if times
can
got
pay that
hard,
debt.
I could sell it,
Yeah.
and I would be out of that debt. But yeah, this whole being like up the creek without a paddle, like surrounded by grizzly bears with a mortal wound sort of debt.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't require this sort of situation for me to receive forgiveness, to be blessed by somebody, and then turn right around and be a complete idiot to somebody else and show anger or show contempt or show judgment instead of grace or mercy. And it's that transition of, oh yeah, bless me, forgive me, and then and just go off on somebody. Like, what in that transition? Like, to me, it seems just completely self-centered and immature are the two words that come to mind. But I'm just curious, what about the human condition says, yes, shower me in praise and forgiveness and grace and mercy, but no one else gets it because you owe me this and you wronged me this way, and it makes me feel like a child to act that way.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had a better answer, but I mean, it's our sinful fallen nature.
That's not a bad answer.
Well, it's not a bad answer, but it's.
I'm not looking for a formula, Dave.
Oh no, I know, but I guess there is just sort of this rolling around in my head of just, why do you do it? Well, it makes me feel better about myself, sort of a thing. It's fun to kind of create that me and you versus them, or we're better than them, or can you?
Well, but that sort of mentality is what I'm trying to figure out. Why do we have that? If you genuinely think about how twisted it is, that I can go, I feel better about myself because I have ruined that person's day. Like, that's pretty sick.
Yeah.
That I'm going to get that much pleasure out of putting someone else in their place. Like, I'm better than they are because I have nicer clothes, or I have more education, or I just was able to put one over on them. Like, whenever I think about this mentality, I think of middle school. And I'm not in middle school, and I've not been in middle school for quite a while. Like, I'm about to turn 30. I should not be acting like a 12-year-old version of myself. And that is what I'm trying to get at, is that this dude was acting like a 12-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
He was screwed. And he got totally let off the hook, had zero appreciation for it. I mean, I can think of times when I was a good kid overall. I thought I was smarter than my parents. I let them know it. I thought I was smarter than everybody else, and I let them know it. But I never did anything like bad. I was just an idiot and didn't know I was an idiot. And I can think of situations where my parents let me off the hook, and I turned right around, and I was just an idiot to them, having no idea and no understanding of, dude, you're playing with house money right now. You need to be a little more chill about this whole situation. And so, like, I see that tendency in me today of, like, yeah, I'm 29 and I'm an adult and all that stuff, but I still, in moments like this, act like I'm 12, where I think that I'm smarter than everybody else and I deserve to be a little bit higher above them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just frustrating, to think that it's been 17 years and I still want to be like that jerk of a middle school kid. Sometimes, not all the time. Every once in a while, I act mature. It's just frustrating.
Oh, and it's just like, I even just have to laugh at, like, I mean, I teach classes on how to how to be an effective communicator in this stuff, and how to deal with conflict, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, I'm in a position of authority at work, and probably in the one position at the department where I mean, it's just really humbling. I mean, I'm really in a position of I'm supposedly, my integrity, like, this is just even weird for me to say this out loud kind of deal. Like, I'm in a position of, you're there because the perception of you is that your integrity, your character is quote unquote better than others.
Irreproachable.
And so I even think about being in that context, and it's just like, and yet I still do this kind of stuff. Now, I'm really good at putting a front up of not, letting people know that, and I'm careful about who I have these conversations with. But, I even was in a conversation today where in the moment I realized just how two-faced I was being, of saying, agreeing with somebody that I was just talking about a day earlier, or a couple of days. Actually, it would have been last week because we didn't yesterday. But
okay, I can't let this reference go.
Mm-hmm.
You work in a department. It's a police station. Am I allowed to say what department it is?
Sure.
Internal Affairs. And you just referenced being two-faced.
Right.
Have you watched Batman?
Yes.
Harvey Dent worked in, you're going to be a supervillain.
That'd be kind of cool.
No, man, I don't know. You'd be infamous. And I'd be guilty by association, Dave. Oh, man.
Yeah. I
want to go watch that movie now. I've got no time, though. There's not enough time in the day.
There's not enough time, period. Yeah, I've joked that, and this is more on the, I want to be a vigilante when I quit my job. I'll do it for free. You don't have to pay me.
I think that's kind of what vigilantes do. They don't really get paid.
Right. Not mercenary, not...
Yeah, but no. You want to be like the Arrow or the Flash or like Batman.
Right. Just let me know a name, and
I'm Batman.
I'll take care of it.
Ooh, what would your superhero name be, Dave?
I really don't know. But here's the thing. I have those moments of, I'm like, the people that play by the rules just get, I'm not going to say the word, but it's like...
railroaded? Can
railroaded.
we settle on that one?
I mean, it's just, and it's so frustrating. But anyway, complete tangent. Sorry.
You do realize that I'm going to have to bleep out the vigilante word so that in case it ever does come true, that you will have plausible deniability.
You'll deny it down the road.
Yes. So wait, if you're a vigilante, does that mean I can be your sidekick that stays back in the lair and plays on the computers?
That would be
and
great.
Somehow manages to hack all of the government satellites without anyone ever noticing?
Yes.
Awesome. That means I get a really cool name. Anyways, gosh, we're such nerds. I do want to actually kind of talk about what this parable means on the grander scale, which is what I think Jesus was trying to get to. I've so far done very well in focusing on the minutia of this, but to your point earlier, when I said I don't really owe anybody that much, you were like, haha, yes you do. You owe God everything. And you were getting ahead of schedule,
Sorry.
Dave. Well, it's because you're intelligent and you see these things. So obviously, well, I shouldn't say so obviously. That's might not be obvious to people. Now I feel bad. But in this parable, we are the person who owes the just ludicrous amount of money to this king.
Mm-hmm.
This king has every right to do what he was going to do, which was to sell the man, his wife, and their children to another slaver in attempts to recoup some of the money. There's no way he's going to be able to sell this guy for that much. But like any shrewd businessman, if you know you can't recoup all of it, you recoup as much as possible and move on. So that is God in this situation. God, in his grace, says, you know what? Fine. I will do the gracious and merciful thing. I will forgive your debt, and you're free to go. Because he released the slave too. You're good.
And his family, yeah.
Yep, just go. Just go. Go restart. You don't owe me anything, and you're no longer even my property. Just go. And then we are also that same person who turns around and tries to squeeze out money from somebody else. And I think what Jesus is trying to communicate here is that if, and this goes hand in hand with my brother has sinned against me, how many times must I forgive him? If God is willing to forgive us of the greatest debt that we could ever accumulate in a million lifetimes, we must be willing to forgive others that same amount. And when put in such a extreme scenario as this, slave and master situation, you might be able to say, "Oh, that's ridiculous. No one owes anyone that much money," and that's fine. But we're missing the point if we don't see that God has forgiven a unpayable debt. There's nothing that we could do to repay that debt, no matter how long we worked, no matter how good we were. And too often our reaction to that is to go point out to other people what they owe us, when in reality we should be saying grace, forgiveness, mercy. And I'll let you know when I get that figured out.
Yeah. Time and time again, we talked about judging others last week, and I still think it's ultimately God's job to judge. And when I say judge, I think there's this, I use the term judge in terms of this is the consequences for your action. I certainly think that as Christians, we can point out to fellow believers, not people that are outside the church, but people that are in the church, of this is where your behavior doesn't match up to what God calls us to be. So I certainly think we can do that. But time and time again, I think we all forget how much we've truly been forgiven. And it's just so easy to fall into that trap of holding others to a standard that we don't hold ourselves to. Or we're holding others to a standard that we think we hold ourselves to that we really don't.
You mean that double standard that no one wants to acknowledge?
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, it's that whole, I can point to a specific sin and go, you're doing this and I don't do it. But the reality is we all choose things that are not God, and we choose things of this world in ways that we should be things that should be fulfilled by God. And so while we may not do exactly what that person is doing, I may not have a gambling debt, I may not have a gambling addiction, but the reality is there are often times where I choose television over God because it's what I want, and
it's just easier.
And I'm not saying TV is sinful, but for Dave Hogue, at certain times, there are times where I am consciously choosing TV over God. And that is just, a sin is a sin. We're all sinners. So, I don't know, I'll get off the soapbox. And I'll just simply own this, that I need to forgive others more often. And not only that, not be so quick to point out their faults or their sins. and be so blind to the sins that are in my life.
Agreed. Well,
Yeah.
I think it's my bedtime.
Yeah, it's getting close.
I'm just kidding. I've got like 2 hours of stuff still to do. There's not enough time in the day, man. My dad used to say that. I was like, what are you talking about? I got all kinds of free time. And now I'm just like, oh my gosh, where did it all go?
I can't believe it's July already.
Yeah. I have this theory, real quick, about time. All of our scientist listeners can write in and tell me if I'm right or wrong. Just because I'm honestly curious. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I just want to know. So, when you're a kid and everything always seems like it's a year away, and it just drags, and now you're older and you're like, oh my god, it's my birthday. Like, it was my birthday 2 weeks ago, or it's gonna be Christmas in like 2 weeks. Even though it's still 5 months away, like it'll be here like that. I have this theory that the older you get, time seems to speed up because each day is a smaller and smaller percentage
Right.
of your existence. So when you're 24 hours is like, it's a significant amount of time. But when you're, almost 30 or in your 40s, like a day, I could sleep for one of those and not even miss it.
Yeah.
And so time just seems to have this momentum where it just speeds up and speeds up and speeds up till all of a sudden you're a wrinkly old person with lots of wisdom.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's just simply a smaller percentage of your life. And I've never thought about it in terms of a day. I've always thought about it in terms of a year. And that's just, when you're 2, a year is half your life. Yeah. When you're 45, a year is 1/45 of your life. So.
Oh, that's an ugly decimal.
Yeah. So to me, that's where it kind of is. And I think you're right. I think it's just a smaller percentage of.
Well, and how much of those 45 years do you remember?
So little.
Exactly. But at the same time, your brain's just like, there's no way the summer is halfway over. It just, yeah. Oh, we need to stop the show. We need to start a science show. But
science for non-scientists.
Seriously, that would be a lot of fun. I don't know what we'd talk about, but we could bring all of our smart friends on and have them talk science to us.
We could.
Not that we are unintelligent. That is just not our area of knowledge.
No.
I do want to make a volcano go. That'd be fun. All right, we're stopping now. Bye.
Bye.